Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news. Let's get started. Alright, to kick things off, we're talking about Nintendo 3DS emulation with Mikage. Now, we've talked about Mikage a lot in previous videos. A lot of people were wondering when this emulator was going to release, and a lot of people were wondering if this emulator was even real. Well, it turns out that yes, the emulator is 100% real and Mikage has released. So over on GitHub, Mikage Developer Edition has been released. Now, if we take a look here, this one is being actively updated. NeoBrain, the person behind Mikage, has just updated something as of yesterday. However, there is one catch. Basically, anyone looking to use Mikage will have to build it themselves. Now, the build instructions are right up on their GitHub. It's not overly complicated. And under usage, they say for the first launch, 3 things must be set up. A complete AES keys.txt must be placed in the build folder. A virtual NAND must be bootstrapped from a game update partition. And the 3DS initial system setup must be run. Now I'm guessing here, and I could be wrong, but I'm guessing here that some people may not want to build Mikage themselves and are just waiting for a .exe to download and run on their PC. And I don't think that's going to happen, not directly from NeoBrain anyway. So if people are waiting for a .exe, you're probably going to be waiting basically forever. Or possibly find another GitHub that's forked this just to release a .exe file, which then introduces the possibility of viruses. And again, I could be wrong about all of that, but realistically here, just in general, it's great to learn more about stuff directly from the source. If you were to pick up something not directly from the source, there is that risk of viruses and malware and all of that. And that's not just with Mikage, that's with basically anything. So there you have it. Mikage is 100% real. It has released, and in my opinion, this is a very big release and something very big for the 3DS emulation scene. Let me know your thoughts about Mikage in the comments below, and I'm certain we're going to hear a lot more about it in the future as other people decide to learn more about this one and possibly check it out. And speaking about new emulators that have just released, next up here we're talking about PS4 emulation with psOff. And psOff just had its very first release. So at the time of filming, 2024 December 31st is the latest release of psOff, or rather the first release of psOff. Now don't expect anything crazy with psOff like booting Bloodborne and running it flawlessly with no issues whatsoever. It's still pretty early on in terms of overall development, but at the same time progress is being made. If you wanted to learn more about it, I do recommend checking out their Discord. And speaking about progress, next up we're talking about PlayStation 2 emulation with Play. And Literal Mente Game just posted a brand new progress report for Play over on their Patreon page. They compare what Play looked like at the beginning of January 2024 and what Play looks like now at the end of December 2024. Play has made a ton of progress this year, and there's even more games now listed as playable, and I do recommend checking out this Patreon post. Like everything I talk about, link will be in the description below at the bottom. Play is available for Windows, Mac, Linux, Android, iOS, and in a browser. And on top of that, it does not require a BIOS file. Now, Play is not on the level of PCSX2 just yet, but Play does keep getting better and better. And speaking about stuff getting better and better, next up we're talking about MAME, which stands for Subscribe to Mr. Sujano, or Multiple Arcade Machine Emulator, depending on how you wanted to interpret that. Anyways, MAME version 0.273 just dropped. So almost like every other release of MAME, there's a whole bunch of bugs that have been fixed. There's new working systems, new working clones, and even more. I would say the MAME team works really hard here, and there's a lot that gets done every single month. Additionally, and this one is kind of niche, they say that microcontrollers for Sun Electronics, Kangaroo, and Data East Earth Defense Force have been dumped and emulated. This fixes several issues where the simulation was incorrect for Kangaroo, affecting gameplay and sound. Speaking of which, there have been quite a few fixes for sound issues in arcade games. And speaking about improvements, next up here we're talking about RetroArch, and it appears that the RetroArch team is getting ready for version 1.20. Now, all of this information can be found right on their GitHub page. They've got bug fixes, they've got improvements like touchscreen improvements, and even more. There's one thing here that is getting a lot of people's attention, and that is CloudSync. It appears that CloudSync is going to be a part of RetroArch version 1.20, and in my opinion, this is a massive feature. Now, unfortunately, I don't know the release date yet for version 1.2, but as soon as I know more, you'll know more. I'm assuming we're going to see it in the next couple of months, but I could be wrong here. Either way, this is a massive feature for RetroArch, and I would say one feature that a lot of people are going to look forward to, especially for those people who do not use the Steam version of RetroArch. On a side note here, if you wanted to check this out before the official stable release, you absolutely can. If you head to retroarch.com and click on download, you can go down to download nightly here and pick it up for your system of choice. It's under nightly builds under their BuildBot site, and well, you can pick it up for basically whatever. However, since it is a nightly build and not stable, and this is a very new feature, there may be some bugs, there may be some issues, and it may not work as intended just yet. If you are looking for stability and no issues and no bugs whatsoever, or at least not a lot of bugs, then I'd recommend just waiting for the stable release whenever they release it. And speaking about official releases, next up we're talking about Sega Saturn emulation with Kronos, and Kronos version 2.7.0 just dropped. If you are curious about this one and wanted to learn more about the release, I do recommend checking out their YouTube video where they showcase in 22 minutes, basically almost 23 minutes, basically everything that has changed. And it's all divided into timestamps to make things nice and easy. There's new playable games and a whole bunch of graphic fixes. Kronos is 100% free, it's open source. The changelog I think is pretty much up to date. So you can check the changelog just to see what games there are and what games are playable, and well, if the games that you want to play can actually be played in this emulator. And speaking about Sega and emulators, next up here we're talking about a new emulator for the Sega Lindbergh. Video Game Esoterica has a brand new video showcasing this emulator in action. For those who may not be aware, the Lindbergh was released I think back in 2005, and it's well known for games like Virtua Fighter 5, House of the Dead 4, as well as Outrun 2, and even more. If you are curious about this one, I recommend checking out Video Game Esoterica's video to see the video in action, as well as the link to the GitHub. Next up, we're shifting from Sega to Nintendo and talking about the Nintendo Switch 2, and another day, another Nintendo Switch 2 rumor. I'm not having a whole video just talking about this one, it's a small section here, and well, this is a small section of the motherboard that we're seeing. Anyways, it appears the Switch 2 motherboard has leaked. Some people may be skeptical as to whether or not it's a real picture of the motherboard. I mean, I am. Anyways, this person here says, first pic of this post shows the backside of the circuit board. When mirrored, it seems to match up with this leak from a while ago. Wow, it's real. And taking a look at the two pictures here, and yeah, it's very similar. So interestingly, we've seen a whole lot of leaks about the Switch 2 so far in regards to the hardware. I mean, we've seen the outside, we've seen now the inside. The one thing we really haven't seen yet are the games, and I think most people are more interested in what games are going to be on the Switch 2 and what it's going to run. And Tom Warren, an industry insider, says there are so many rumors floating around about the Switch 2, but the funniest one is about it being as powerful as a PS4 Pro. So I am very curious here as to whether or not what we've seen about the Switch 2 is actually real in terms of what the hardware is going to look like. And I am more curious about what games are going to run on the Switch 2, what it's going to look like, and overall how it's going to perform. But I am curious as to your thoughts on the matter. Do you think this is the real Switch board? Do you think that what we've seen so far is the real form factor for the Switch 2? Or do you think Nintendo is going to surprise everyone and release something completely different than what's been reported so far? And speaking about hardware, next up we're talking about the Ayaneo 3. And Ayaneo has just unveiled a brand new video showcasing the Ayaneo 3 hardware in action, and it's something I wish Nintendo did for the Switch. Now, Ayaneo is calling this one the Magic Module. They say it's the world's first and unique. And taking a look here, you can just pop out the module and pop in a different control scheme, and it's all magnetic. It seems there's going to be a bunch of different options available. For example, if you wanted more buttons for fighting games, if you wanted dual joysticks, if you wanted touchpads or a D-pad. And I am really looking forward to seeing user experiences with this. Unfortunately, we still don't know the price or release date of this Ayaneo 3, but we're led to believe we're going to know more towards the end of January. And as for what's powering it, there's going to be two different versions. One that has the AMD Ryzen 7 8840U, and the more powerful one, which has the AMD Ryzen 9 AI HX 370. Next up, we're talking about a Fedora-based Linux distribution aimed towards gaming, and that is Nobara. and Nobara just got a brand new release that makes a very interesting change. So first and foremost, they're calling this new release Nobara 41, which makes complete sense considering they've updated the base to Fedora 41. So the big change here, and arguably very welcome change, is that they now ship with the open NVIDIA driver by default. They say if your GPU is older than Turing, but still supported by the closed driver, you will need to make manual changes. And additionally here, the Flatpak beta channel has now been added to the list of default installed and enabled Flatpak repositories. Nobara is free, it's open source, and on top of that, it ships with Linux kernel 6.12 as well as KDE Plasma version 6.2. And speaking about Linux kernel 6.12 LTS, next up we're talking about Debian. And Debian has just released Trixie Alpha 1, which is Debian 13. Now this release is cutting edge, so it's not going to be perfect, there will be issues with it, and they say they're no longer building an installer for the i386 architecture, even if they remain in archive at the moment. And the RISC-V64 architecture is brand new. And speaking about stuff that's brand new, next up we're talking about the legendary Kryzen, who has just posted a brand new video called Unreal Engine 5.5, Zelda Ocarina of Time Kakariko Village. If you're interested in watching The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time in Unreal Engine 5, and as well as Zelda Inception here, it is a video worth checking out. It's a very beautiful video in my opinion. Now I don't know about you, but when I see remake and remaster, this is what I'm hoping to see in terms of video games. This is obviously unofficial and a fan project, but at the same time here, I mean, if Nintendo did this with Ocarina of Time, I would be all over it. Next, we're talking about LG, and LG has just unveiled their hybrid AI Gram laptops. They say they offer the best of both worlds with on-device and cloud AI services. These will range in size from 15.6 inches to 17 inches. They will feature different variations of the Intel Ultra-Core processor, and the 17-inch version here will feature an NVIDIA RTX 4050. These are all coming in pretty darn light, around 3 pounds overall. These will obviously be shown off at CES, and I'm very curious overall as to the sound profile. Not the speakers involved, but the fan sound profile. I'm guessing these could be very loud, at least the one with the RTX 4050, given the fact that they are very thin and, well, trying to keep these cool may be difficult. I could be wrong about that, but I'm very curious to see how these pan out. And speaking about AI and NVIDIA, next up we're talking about NVIDIA open sourcing Run AI. So NVIDIA spent around $700 million to acquire Run AI, and as soon as the deal closed, they announced their intent to open source it. They haven't open sourced it yet, but they intend to. Unfortunately, I don't know the date or where they're going to open source it. But they say, true to our open platform philosophy, as part of NVIDIA, we will keep empowering AI teams with the freedom to choose the tools, platforms, and frameworks that best suit their needs. So we'll have to wait and see what happens when NVIDIA open sources Run AI and if there are any benefits to be realized. I would say this is a big win for open sourcing and I guess a big win for AI. But moving on, and next up we're talking about Xbox 360 emulation with Xenia Manager. Now, Xenia Manager is not an emulator in itself. It's designed to work with Xenia to make things very simple and straightforward to set things up and utilize. And Xenia Manager just got a brand new update. So at the time of filming, Xenia Manager version 2.2.0 is the latest update, and Xenia Manager is updated quite a bit. The developer is very active with this one. As for new features here, they've introduced game parsing without Xenia. So they say here they've introduced a new method for parsing game details that does not rely on Xenia. And this feature is a lightweight port of the Xbox 360 toolkit. On top of that, they say the list of games with optimized settings now includes 300 titles. Xenia Manager is 100% free and open source, and like everything I talk about, link will be in the description below if you wanted to learn more about it. Next up, we're talking about the RetroTINK 4K, or specifically the RetroTINK 4K CE. I'm assuming CE stands for cheaper edition, but I could be wrong about that. Anyways, the RetroTINK 4K isn't very cheap on its own, but it appears that it's getting a cheaper version. If you are curious about this one, I do recommend checking out RetroRGB's video. It seems the PCB for the RetroTINK 4K CE is very similar to the 4K. It just features a cheaper FPGA. Now, at the time of filming, the RetroTINK 4K goes for a whopping $750. The next step down is the 5X Pro, which goes down to $325. And my personal favorite, the one that I've currently got, the 2X Pro, which is only $140. Admittedly, I'm very curious to see how the 4K CE is received in the retro gaming community. I mean, $750 is a lot to invest in one of these devices if you wanted to play your consoles on a 4K TV. But at the same time, if you've got a lot of retro games and a lot of retro consoles, and wanted to potentially play them in the best way possible on a modern TV, the RetroTINK 4K might be up your alley. I'm assuming the CE is going to be popular and also hard to get a hold of. And last up here, we're talking about Doom. Now, we've seen Doom on a pregnancy test. We've seen Doom in a Lego brick. We've seen Doom in a keycap on a keyboard. And now we're seeing Doom as a captcha. And this is a brand new captcha concept. Maybe not a concept, I mean, I guess it works here, where you can verify if you're human by playing Doom and killing at least 3 enemies in nightmare mode. So this may take a while for some people. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm very curious to see if this actually gets adopted on any websites. I mean, is it practical? Absolutely not. Is it cool? Absolutely yes. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and the legendary one fluff. We talked about a lot today. Let me know your thoughts about absolutely any of it in the comments below. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button. Check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate. Save your state.